Hello and welcome to this session on the golden rules of Superfandom, an important and interesting topic area, and to discuss that with us today we have me, who's introducing it, but more importantly we have these wonderful speakers. We have Dwayne Clark from BBC Studios Kids and Family, we have Naomi Dare from Coolaby, Anna Rafty from the Lego Group, Sarah Rodriguez from Fandom, and Ashley Thorpe from Storymix. So just before we get into it, just a brief introduction about me and us, and by me, I'm Nick Fisher, creative director at Hook, and Hook is a youth and kids focused research agency who specialise in the media, covering projects like television, digital publishing and culture, and we've even worked for some of you people in the room. And a question that's increasingly getting asked of us is about fandom and how to understand fans better, because the youth media landscape is becoming increasingly fragmented. Kids' attentions are now being pulled in hundreds of different ways, almost simultaneously, whether that's choosing which platforms or what content to watch on TV and streaming services, indulging passions from emulating the creations of Bake Off to trying to mimic what's being built on Lego Masters, choosing which console to play games on and what games to choose themselves, or even following influencers on Twitch, YouTube, and social media platforms I don't even know yet, at the touch of a button. And with all of these spaces and properties competing for young audiences' mindshare, it's increasingly asked, what can brands do to grow and cement their power through building superfandoms, groups of highly engaged audiences? And that's what we're going to be looking at today, and what creators and marketers can do to create those types of audiences. First of all, before we talk to Sarah from Fandom about fan archetypes and who they've identified in their research, we're going to introduce you to some of the young people who we spoke to before coming here and what they think of fandom and what makes them super fans.
Minecraft is my favourite game right now.
So I got a person that looks like a fox and he's dressed up.
I really like Star Wars.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I'm very passionate about Lego. If I see something that looks good, I will immediately want it.
I'm a fan of Blue. I usually watch it most of the time. I feel happy when Aston Villa play.
I think fans aren't really as interested in the thing as a superfan is.
Superfans all the way at the top, you really like the thing. When it's where it's really important to you.
You follow its every move, you keep up on the latest updates.
Yeah, they love it so much. Can't live without it.
I first got into them when my mum bought me the book set.
And then I follow on from my dad because my dad supports Aston Villa, so it kind of makes sense. I heard lots of my friends in school play it, so I chose to play Minecraft as well.
I got into Doctor Who through TikTok. I was scrolling on TikTok and I thought, who's this man? He was a 10th Doctor, and I saw him doing something really interesting, so I'd scan the internet to try and find out who he was.
I saw something on YouTube, it was Zane's ice set. It had guns, it had weaponry, it looked cool, and now I've got it.
Sometimes in YouTube I go to look at stuff about Harry Potter. I just found it, I wanted to learn more.
I even watch videos because it makes you learn more better of the game. They do interesting facts about behind the scenes and stuff. I like that sort of stuff because you don't really get to know about it through the series.
I like the community part of it, people who like it as well. There's some people who talk about it and stuff online, make videos about stuff in the books.
People that I know don't really know about it, and when I do, they're always quite far away.
I see a lot of Minecraft stuff on Pinterest as well, posters and art and fan art, just stuff like that.
Some people make like characters in it and post stuff about them.
It brought the book to life almost.
I have this t-shirt that I'm wearing, the away t-shirts, 2 of them, 2 home kits.
My nan bought it for my birthday. She asked which one I liked and I said this one.
Yeah, I've got some like clothes, some socks, and then I've got 3 different 10th Doctor suits. If I ever do make TikToks from it, I'll be able to use it in them.
I like the action figures. Sometimes I just play with it whilst I'm watching it, and I try to do the episode as it's going on.
If you buy merchandise, that means that it connected more with the TV, so
It's like it just feels like I like the show more than I already do.
Right, you've met the kids now, so I think it's time to meet some of our experts. And first of all, Sarah Rodriguez from Fandom, just if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Fandom, and then we'll talk about those archetypes you've produced.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I run a team at Fandom called the Sales Marketing Team. So our team goal is to connect brands and marketers with the fan audiences that they want their products to reach. We deliver media campaign strategies, content partnerships, even fan events. What is unique about the way we work is that we use Fandom's leading data and insights to inform our ideas. And I'm going to tell you a bit about Fandom so you understand how does Fandom have all this data. So Fandom reaches 350 million people in the world every month, 15 million in the UK. And this is thanks to 250,000 wikis that we host. All these wikis cover any franchise, IP, universe you can think of across games, and books, TV shows, even music. So what happens with wiki content is that it's really specific. So every character has its own page, every virtual location has its own page, even a spell would have its own page. So we have 40 million pages of content, and that allows us to be really specific in understanding what elements of a franchise, of a fandom, are driving fan engagement. So what my team does is look at these insights, and we pass it on to clients, and we help them maybe be a bit smarter about the way they reach out to their fans, and be a bit more effective, and they can use those insights to run campaigns across our platforms, but also beyond informing product strategy, for example.
And Fandom recently conducted some research into how audiences engage with different fandoms, and in the research you kind of distilled this into 4 different archetypes. Could you quickly talk us through those?
Yes, so Fandom runs studies of this sort quarterly. We looked into anything related to entertainment and gaming, and we try to understand the why behind fan decision making. And these 4 archetypes don't refer to everyone being part of an archetype. What it means is that each one of us, when we read a book or watch a movie or play a game, fall into one of these 4s within that IP. So I might give you some examples to make it a bit clearer. The intentionalists are those who are putting something in their watch list for later. So we are intentionalists, for example, when we see something on the news, but we decide not to go ahead and just run to the cinemas. For example, I saw a lot of people talking about the Little Mermaid trailer when it came out, and there was a lot of talk about it, and I thought, oh, that might be interesting. I've obviously watched the animation, and might watch it when it comes out on Disney+, but I won't run to the cinemas. If I had run to the cinemas because of the cultural buzz, I would be acting as a culturist. An example of me acting as a culturist is over Christmas last year. I spent quite a bit of time playing Roblox with my nieces. And I know nothing about Roblox, but that's the only thing they would talk about. So I had to learn about Roblox so I could be part of the conversation. But I'm not even a gamer, right? So if I was a gamer, if I like open world games, at least I would have been acting as an intentionalist. An intentionalist, and all of us are intentionalists when we choose to watch something or engage with some sort of content because it aligns with our personal preferences. Maybe it's a genre that we really like. Maybe it has a theme that we're really interested in. So I'm a sucker for fantasy. And I love anything with potions and mages and overcomplicated politics. So right now I'm watching season 3 of The Witcher on Netflix, and I'm loving it. I love The Witcher. But this franchise is bigger than that, right? It has books, it has video games, and I want be engaging with those, and The Witcher will not become a core part of my identity. When something becomes part of your core identity is when you call yourself an advocate or a superfan. And you become an advocate usually when you've been introduced to an IP at an earlier stage of your life. So, for example, in my case, I'd say I'm an advocate for the Wizarding World, the Potterverse, and so on, because I came across Harry Potter books when I was 11. And as you read through Harry Potter books and watch movies, his story obviously also starts when he turns 11. So I kind of grew with this franchise. It became part of who I am. And I would define myself now as a Harry Potter fan, if anyone asks. Traits of an advocate include obviously knowing everything about the franchise, being up to date with new releases, games around it, books that come out around it, new films, but also knowing more than anyone else. Like, you need to be in, you need to know your lore. They're also highly likely to collect merch and toys, and you would find ways of making this fandom a permanent part of your life. So, for example, advocates will get a tattoo, or in my case, if I ever get a ginger cat, I'm calling him Mr. Weasley.
I mean, your advocate archetype feels like a lot of those kids that we just saw on screen and the way that they talked about the things that they loved. Given it's a kids' conference, how do you see the advocate archetype appearing most among young audiences?
So, as I said, the advocate archetype has a highly chance of having been introduced at a young age by a family member or by a friend. They are also highly likely to be the ones that, when they are adults, introduce the franchise to other members of their family or younger people in their lives. This can happen through gifting toys, but also precious moments like co-watching, co-playing, and co-reading. That creates an emotional connection between people of different generations, but also with the IP that they are getting involved with. So that's a really key part of advocate superfans being young. If you think a big franchise like Marvel, obviously they have a lot of flirts intentionally, it's cultures, because it's so big. But the advocates within the Marvel franchise are highly likely to have been introduced to the IP at the early stage of their life, to define themselves as a Marvel fan, to have lots of merch, to have themed rooms, to have something that reminds them of their fandom on a daily basis. And also they're highly likely to pass their Marvel love down to the different generations. Another key thing for kids to become super fans is to be able to consume a lot of content about the IP. They need to be the ones that know the most about it. We've seen in the video, right? Kids see something, they're curious, and they quickly go and start Googling about it and need to read and watch videos, and that will help them build this love. The knowledge that they have for this IP and the space that it takes in their brain will help them build this love. It's also important that the content that they find online is adapted to their level of learning. And that's also why some brands successfully, like Lego, encourage children to create content for other children or to be present in content for other children, because that makes it more relatable and it taps into humor that adults can't really understand anymore. It's also interesting the fact that on fandom, the biggest age group that's creating content within the wikis are 13 to 17-year-old teenagers. They are really highly passionate about their fandoms, and now they have opportunity, they are older, they can write, and they want to get involved in it.
And last question before I throw it to the panelists. I mean, given that these advocates are already deeply involved in brands that they love, why should brands invest time and energy into cultivating this audience further? They're already there.
So just because someone is a super fan doesn't mean they will say yes to everything that is thrown at them around the IP. They're also very critical about the way their favorite worlds are portrayed in different media and the adaptations of it. So there's something about these fan identities that has a waterfall effect. If you convince your advocate fan base and you get their endorsement, you get their love, they start creating content online, they start building this hype that transcends into the other archetypes and into general culture. So you need to ensure that this advocate fan base is with you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Now we're going to go to our panelists and find out a little bit about them before they tell us their golden rules for creating Superfandom. I put people alphabetically. There's no hierarchy here. It's all totally fair. Dwayne, first of all, to you.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, I'm Dwayne Clark, one of the heads of marketing at BBC Studios Kids and Family. And realistically, what fandom and superfandom means to me and my team is we take the amazing content that our production team either creates internally or acquires, and we make sure that that's maximised across our viewers, both within the UK and across the world. And we're providing those touch points and amplifying things that will allow them to really maximise their love for a show through Superfandom.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dwayne. Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi Dare. I'm Director of Digital at Coolabye, which is a children's IP company. We have lots of brands, and part of the company actually write children's fiction, so a lot of our IP starts off life as a book. We have shows like The Clangers and Scream Street that you might be aware of, but the brand I'm talking mainly about today is Warrior Cats. Which is probably the largest fan base is in the US, so you might not all be familiar with it. But Warrior Cats is written by a team of our writers in our company. It's 20 years old now, so although the books appeal to kind of 8 to 12-year-olds initially, a lot of the readers then stay with those books for many, many years. So we have a lot of our fan base moves into the teenage years and through to adult as well. The books are about clans of feral cats. We affectionately call it our Game of Thrones with cats because of the kind of topics that it covers. Battles and heartbreak and territory and yeah, all kind of, it's quite a serious book series. There's not much laughter in it, but there's fantasy, and the people that get into these books absolutely adore the huge world that's been created with over, I think that's 500 different cats that are characters now, which becomes quite complex when you're then extending the brand onwards to try and make sure you've not made any mistakes. And they do sometimes. And actually, our writing team rely quite heavily on the Warriors wiki that's been created on the Fandom channel, because the team of editors there, I think there's something like 15,000 people, go to that wiki to constantly edit and update anything that they found. And our team of writers still use that as a resource because it's a great kind of bank of, oh yeah, that's what happened with that character in that book. The books have sold 70 million copies over the course of those 20 years and often are a New York Times bestseller. The fan base is huge, and really a lot of that's grown organically over time. There's over 1,000 YouTube channels just filled with UGC fan animation, and many of those are kind of joint projects where a load of fans will meet in the community and get together and recreate and produce fan animation, which therefore means a lot of people get into the books because they see the fan animation first and go, what's this based on? It sounds amazing, and then come through to the books. One of the elements that we've introduced more recently, other than just the books, which still continue, is a Roblox game. So 2 years ago, we worked with a developer to create a game for Warrior Cats, which now is one of our biggest kind of touch points for the brand. It sees over 2 million plays every month. Every 2 million players. There's about 15 million gameplays every month, and they spend an average of at least 20 minutes at a time during that game session, where they role play, they create their own characters, or they create the characters from the books. So that has become just as important a touch point now as publishing for us, and we look to extend that further. But that gives you a
brilliant
long intro, sorry.
Game of Thrones for cats, I think, is what most people are going to remember, and that is the most important. Thank you very much, Naomi. Anna.
I'm definitely getting into Warrior Cats. My name is Anna Rafferty. I know lots of you in real life, I've realised in this room. I look after something that is for the Lego Group, which essentially is our global consumer engagement, so direct-to-consumer engagement. Lots of that is digital. Not all of it is digital. I can see my magazine team in the second row here. But what we look after is that direct, long-term, two-way, meaningful relationship with consumers. And we create channels and products, magazines or apps or websites, in order to, create and nurture that long-term, two-way, meaningful relationship. And it has scale. I'm sure you're aware of lots of the things that the Lego Group does, but I think last year we had 63 million unique kids coming to our channels. Adults is a whole different story. It's we also look after that as well, but it's of a different magnitude because there are lots of adult fans as well. And I'm lucky because at the Lego Group, of course, we have our own brand, which has Lego Masters and a fan of building and the creativity and the sort of creative material that the brick is. But we also work with loads of other IPs. So I noticed in the video earlier, the little boy who was talking about Minecraft, what he was showing to exhibit his Minecraft fandom was a Lego set of Minecraft. So we're really lucky. We get to work with the Star Wars and the Minecrafts and all of those brands as well. And in my past life, I've sort of always worked for fandoms, I realise. So Harry Potter and Pottermore, BBC Studios, and everything that Dwayne will now talk to you about, and I'm going to hold myself back from commenting on, and at Penguin Books for a long time as well. So lots of publishing, and feel very passionately about the fact that stories start things often. But the Roald Dahls and all of those big fandoms there as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Anna. And finally, Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Thorpe. So I work in children's publishing. I work for a company called StoryMix, which is a children's fiction studio. We look for commercial slants on stories and generate our stories in-house, and everyone that we do centers kids of colour, essentially. And then we also hire or write with authors of colour to give them their first break into the industry. So it kind of fulfills two prongs, really. We're trying to create the change we want to see and create make sure there's representation in children's fiction, but also trying to make sure that burgeoning writers get a chance, basically, to almost have an apprenticeship with us, to write on the projects that we've already mapped out for them, and then we sell those on to large publishers. I think we've worked with about 9 or 10 so far, pretty large publishers, to see our content go out into the world. So always looking at things with a very commercial slant, but then I'm also always asking, as a writer, when I'm generating a story, what is my entry point to this story? What can I bring from my own personal experience or my own super fandom? And I have a lot of franchises that I'm a fan of as well.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. We're going to go through each of your golden rules. Each of our panelists put together 3 rules for creating Superfandom before coming. They're going to go through them. Then we're going to have a discussion about them and topics coming up from that, and we'll have kind of 10 to 15 minutes for you to ask questions at the end if you want to start thinking of them already. But firstly, Dwayne.
Oh, thank you. Look, there's nothing revolutionary in this when we talk about building fandom for preschool content predominantly, and then sort of that kids 7+. But I think it's really important just to actually lay it down and look at it holistically, because a lot of the stuff, particularly at BBC Studios Kids and Family, we sort of do subconsciously, and that in a way makes my team and my life very, very easy in some respects. But for me, the first one is definitely, intrigue is definitely the foundation for me when it comes to building super fandoms. And that's really apparent in any sort of fandom, be that, pan-genre, pan-industry, wherever people are really engaging with content. And in our world in particular, you've got a show like Hey Dougie, and it's that intrigue around the colour palette, the sounds, the structures that really set off that intrigue and bring people on that journey. Similarly, the team here who have made Something Special for years are sat in the crowd. And I remember when I first started working within children's TV show, a question that I got from people is, what is it about Something Special that attracts those kids and really hooks the audience? And if I was to put a bet on it, there's definitely something about the tone of Justin Fletcher's voice that grabs them in. And then similarly, we're seeing great stuff coming through with other brands that we work on, things like Bluey, which has been an absolute runaway success. But if you look back to the very beginning and think about that as a narrative, it's that intrigue around play and wanting to engage in those family moments. And then similarly, we've launched an amazing show last year, Super Tato, which I think is a gateway show, if I do say so, into people's first super fandom around superheroes. It's like an enabler into the world of Marvel, having a potato and carrot running around a supermarket. And again, what's more intriguing than that, seeing an evil pea trying to corrupt the veg aisle? I mean, what more do you need? And for when we get into it, from a global brand perspective, and we look at the content that we have got to work with, and we are really, really blessed with the portfolio that we've got to play with. Building on that area of fandom again, it goes without saying, it's that access all areas and creating a safe place for our fandoms to grow and love. You know, and it's moved on a lot, hasn't it, really, since the 80s and 90s, when that access all areas was, you know, you could sign up to fan clubs of bands and everyone else around the world. And we've got such great touch points that we own across digital platforms, outside our own streaming touch points. Be that things like our consumer product lines as well, which are amazing. We do things in the live space, but then it's giving people things that they don't necessarily know. And for our content, I think where that comes into building on the super fandom is where we can actually provide access to things that parents find interesting and they can discuss with their kids. There's an amazing scene in an episode of Bluey where the camera pans back and you can see an animator's hand at work finishing a scene, and then it goes back into it. And I'm looking at Hen because she knows exactly the scene that I'm talking about, and we have discussed this with much love. But what an amazing couple of seconds on screen to allow a parent to talk about that creative process with a super fan of Bluey and give that preschooler just some knowledge into the craft of our industry. Similarly, our digital team have done an amazing piece of content the other week, which I think just really tops off this idea of being able to give people access to things they might not necessarily know. So anyone who has kids or has had kids over the last 10 years will have heard the Dougie Stick song at some part of their life. Our wonderful team, and I'm more than happy to play it for some of you at the end, decided it'd be a great idea to stitch the Stick song together in every single language that it exists in and put it out across all our YouTube channels. And yeah, you can go on there and you can find what the Polish word for stick is and teach it to your 5-year-old, much at your own risk, really. And then, you know, within, you know, having that access is great, but fundamentally, and this is where I think brand plays a really important part within building fandoms, is that participation and actually encouraging people into our world, be that digitally or in real life. All you've got to do is sort of stand on the sidelines at CBeebies Land and you see the absolute chaos that our shows bring to bring to these families, and the hysteria that a Hey Dougie costume character can generate amongst a group of 3-year-olds is really something to be in awe of. And that's worked really, really great. You know, we've just gone on sale for Bluey's Big Play within the UK this year, and this is not founded in any fact, but I think we really rival Taylor Swift and her tour tickets with the appetites. And you know, again, talking about Dougie, because it's something I work on particularly really closely, the Olivier Award-winning show, and being able to open that theatre space up to kids over the last year, for them to be able to get in the theatre, participate, and actually build on that love for the show has been really, really lovely. So, you know, to summarise, really, nothing essentially groundbreaking in there, but actually just really pragmatic rules for how you can take wonderful content and open it out to a world of preschoolers and young adults.
You talked about intrigue, but how important is relatability? Because it feels like with the shows that you talked about, there's an inherent togetherness to them all. Like Bluey's family together, two girls, two parents, but they live a kind of chaotic but aspirant life with incredible script writing. Dougie and the squirrels together in the playhouse. Even Super Potato and his relatable gang of Carrot and Broccoli and his arch nemesis Evil P. So, how important is togetherness and relatability, really?
Yeah, it definitely is an important factor. But I think to sort of not go away from your question, Nick, but it's almost like the emulation side of things as well, because yes, you are looking at a family in Bluey, but you know, they're dogs. So there's only so much you can relate to, but there is that emulation for something like Super Potato as well that builds it. So, you know, the relatability is there. It's definitely subtle and it's something that they can identify with, but it's just told in a very beautiful, colourful way that's different than seeing a carbon copy of your own family on screen.
Super Potato's got a good song too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Dwayne was just saying, I feel these are sort of some basics really, but it's hard to move away from the basics when you've got a fandom. So yeah, just sort of going through them in a bit more detail, listening to the fans, just understanding who those fans are. I think it's very difficult to create fans from nothing. Like if somebody loves your story or your characters or your world, they'll become a fan. And I think what you can do as the brand is then move them along that journey from being a fan or whatever that was at the beginning of your archetypes through to that advocate and that super fan. That's the role I feel we can play as a brand owner, is kind of, if they already love something in the story that they connect with, then we can kind of help move them along that journey. So it's listening to the fan. What do they love about your product or your show or your property? And when I say listening to, for the younger fans, probably more research, because you can't really listen to what younger fans say on social media. So it's probably more research-led, but, you know, really getting a feel for what is it that they love about the show or the property, so that you can kind of take that on board in order to kind of develop further activations or tools, and really then work out what you want to do. But also, in terms of listening, I think when it's a slightly older audience, you can listen online, but it's really difficult sometimes to hear what the mass voice of the fandom is rather than the very few, very loud ones, because some of them are very critical. So you think, oh God, the fans absolutely hate this. And then you actually maybe use some social media listening tools to kind of go, is this generally what everybody's saying? And you realise, no, actually it was just a few very loud ones. So I think when you're listening, it's kind of balancing out that you don't always have to listen to the loudest few. It's kind of making sure, is that what the whole fan base feels? So yeah, listening and learning about your fans is kind of step one, because then you can kind of do the next steps. So involving the fans and getting a balance. So involving the fans for me is hugely important. Again, like you said, if you can get those super fans and those advocates to really be on board with something new that you're doing, or even something old that you're doing, but kind of, you know, show more love for it, you then get them spreading the word and them generating content, which actually brings the brand to new fans. We try and create a balance. We try and involve the fans where we can. We might involve them in polls to go, which is the next character you want to see as a plush toy. Weirdly, that gets the most interaction of all. They're just desperate for plush. It's quite simple. But we also have polls which talk about which characters do you want to see the backstory of, so that we can create a book specifically about a character that all of them are intrigued about. So it's involved, and they're obviously then really thrilled when we can publish that book and go, you guys actually helped us choose this character. So they feel involved in the story of where the brand's going. But it is possible to over-involve those fans. Again, I think sometimes if you listen to everything, you can't always do everything that they want necessarily. So, and you also want to surprise and delight them. Sometimes you want to give them something that they didn't even know that they wanted. So if you can kind of bring something new, or it's a new creative direction, I think it's important. Or it might just be some exclusive piece of news or something that they never knew before. But it's also important not to involve them in everything, but to surprise them. And then thirdly, it's encouraging that fandom to then do UGC, basically, encourage their self-expression of what they feel. With Warriors, it's very much about fan art, fan fiction, fan animation. And I think that tends to be the case with a lot of entertainment brands. You know, they will express themselves in a way where it brings their own creativity to the brand. And I think that's the magic mix. If you can get them to create that content and put it out on TikTok, on YouTube, then that's the key really to bringing the brand to new fans, because new fans will see that and go, that looks amazing, where can I find out more? So there, my whistle-stop 3 rules.
Do you design elements of the Warrior Cat series with virality in mind, or do you kind of take it, do you look at the wikis and understand what people are saying and then use that more of an influence? What's the starting point?
With marketing activities, obviously we want them to be as viral and go as big as they can. I mean, we don't always know what's going to go viral. There was one element to our website when we issued a kind of Warriors name to people that registered on our site, and a huge viral campaign happened without us even meaning it. They basically drew the character name that they were given, which we hadn't really intended. So there's some things that can happen, you know, just kind of organically. In terms of the book writing, I think it's quite important that the writers kind of stick to the stories and the characters, and that's not necessarily a community-driven project. They have to be quite editorially clear about where those stories are going. So it kind of depends on what you're creating.
Right. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. So I think I submitted 9 rules originally, and I was edited. But I realise that, because I agree with everything that both of you have said, and I hope that I won't be too repetitive, but there may be some of these I think are reinforcing what you've already said, but maybe with a different nuance. So the iceberg point, you already made it quite very well, I think. you be careful of what you see, because what you see may not be the whole thing. And, you know, just as you already said, so I won't dwell on it, there are often very loud minorities. And there's a danger that you can believe that they speak for everybody, but that's not always true. And that, you know, you need to be thoughtful, not have knee-jerk reactions, and have appropriate methodologies. Social listening is one, research, certainly others, you know, A/B testing, all these sorts of things, to really interrogate what you think you're seeing. So sort of don't panic, but don't think that, you know, what you initially see is the whole truth. I guess number 2 around this idea of, look, you don't own the fandom. You may well own the IP. You editorially have a vision for the story and you created those characters. But once, you know, the fans fall in love with it and start creating their own content and start shipping characters or writing fan fiction or, you know, engaging each other, meeting their communities in there, then that's theirs. And you just have to be really careful about that. So, and there is a difference between having a mentality, which is that we will listen, exactly as you said, and then create environments and, you know, be able to create safe, creative, flourishing spaces that the fans feel, you know, psychological safety to be part of and to express themselves, as well as feeling that they're being nourished, you know, with their obsession. But you don't own it, right? You're curating it and really listening, helping, testing. You know, we do a lot of experimentation. We have a hypothesis that they might like this. We'll spin something up. Do they like it? Oh, they did like it. We're going to do more of that. Oh, they didn't like that. We're going to stop doing that. And we're going to do something else. So that, you know, and it's all sort of connected to this idea that we're not, and this is not to say that I don't respect the single authorial view, but when it comes to the fandom, it's just realizing that it's, you know, what the audience sees is contributing to the final story as well. And then the third one, this maybe perhaps hasn't yet been said. When someone wants to self-identify, so you talked about advocates, you know, I've used evangelists in my previous lives. That then is super personal. That is something about them, about their identity, you know, that they are a Slytherin, or they are, you know, they are this, we were talking about Spice Girls earlier, you know, whatever it is, you know, whatever you have created, that they see something of themselves and that they wish to then self-identify, and it becomes, you know, the tattoo that they get or whatever it might be. All of a sudden, this is super, super personal to an individual. And what that means is, if you then mess with it, if you get your canon wrong because you haven't checked your Wikia, you know, if you do something like that, then it's really, really significant to people, and it really will shake their world. And it's not business to them. You know, this is the way that they can show up in the world, and it's real. You know, it's not that they're just being cross with you, you know, they're not just pedants. It's because you've done something to their sense of self. And I think that we just have to really respect that and realise, if you're lucky enough to have something that people care that much about, that you have, you know, or clever enough to have created something that people care that much about, then be super, super thoughtful about, you know, the direction that you take that character in, or whatever happens to that world, because you could really break someone's heart. And when it's a child, there is responsibility, I think, there.
What is it you think about these big brands? You talked about Harry Potter, obviously massive, that allows it to occupy a role for superfans as being hyper-personal, people want to be a Slytherin or a Hufflepuff, but also being accessible to a wider market. How does it balance both of them?
I mean, really good stories, really good writing. We were talking about this a little bit before, you know. And I think there's something interesting about the fact that we're talking about super fandoms for young people and children, in that, you know, we all are, of course, but when you sort of, I've got a just about to be 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. My 12-year-old, he absolutely wants to be an individual, right? He wants to be completely himself. He is not, he doesn't like my music. He's finding his own way. He also needs to be part of the gang. He needs to be in the tribe. And that's why there's something interesting about, let's stick with Harry Potter, right? The reason why the school scarves are, or certainly were, the best-selling consumer product, because, I can be a Slytherin and I am an individual, but also I'm part of the big Slytherin gang. So it gives you this sense of both belonging and individuality. And I think if you can crack both those things, where you can, again, create a sense of individual identity, but also belong to something, it sounds like that's a contradiction, but it's just a really wonderful, comforting place, and young people need that. That's something they're going through.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. Ashley.
Yeah, so in my intro section, I mentioned coming at every bit of my writing from, finding what my entry point is, essentially. And I think authenticity is maybe a word that's used quite a lot, but is a very important thing to consider. Obviously, we're in whatever business we are in with the aim of it being successful and making money. But if it is just to be a commercial vehicle and that's kind of it, if it's just following a trend for the sake of making a quick buck, then I think you're not going to see the long-term success that many franchises have had over the years, like not just from one generation, but several generations of kids. So with every project, it's like, what is my entry point into this? What is my way with this? It's coming from an authentic place. And I'll give a great example of this right now. So Across the Spider-Verse just came out last month. Incredibly successful film. Also a very good film, but I don't think it's a coincidence that at the point where writers of color have been in control of the story at Marvel is when it's seen the most success, versus Miles Morales as a character has been around since 2011. And at that point, where it's a white writer at Marvel, and there's nothing to say that that's it's not an incorrect thing for that to happen, but it's not coming at a point where he can kind of draw on his cultural experience to really make it a fully formed character. So it didn't really touch too much on the racial aspects of the character at that point. At the point where we've now got head writer and then just general comic story writer as well, who are both POCs, able to bring a lot more to the story to make it that much richer. So there are universal themes for Spider-Man and Miles Morales, and every kid can kind of relate to, trying to find your own way, and maybe you're okay at school, but like you're struggling and not doing so good, and you're trying to find your path and trying to find your way of love, as the Gwen Stacy arc and stuff as well. But also, there are deeper things with that. So if you're watching it and you're from a Latino or African Caribbean or African American culture, you're looking at, and you're laughing at how the mom's reacting to, like, oh, Gwen Stacy's just coming with shoes. Like, that's definitely like something that it will be told off for with like a parent of color, or food aspects, or whether it's just like the mother not thinking that any girl is going to love her kid as much as she does, that kind of thing, where it's allowing the viewer or the reader or whatever it is to kind of see themselves in the story as well, and that kind of representation is so important. The flip side of that, of course, is that if you're in the racial majority, it's just normalizing for kids the fact that actually, yes, this African American and Latino character can be a hero, and that's also cool. Knowing exactly who your audience is. For so long now, we've been using, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and trying to target down on like who it is we're trying to reach with like advertising or whatever. And it's so specific. Obviously, you want to reach the widest audience possible, but just going back to how Sarah introduced things with trying to find that advocate, it's knowing exactly who it is that you want to reach, because the superfans are the ones who are going to drive your product or your vehicle or your content to make sure that it reaches the people who will just maybe dip in because it's like, oh, meme culture, or whatever else it is, where they just don't want to miss out on it, so they have that kind of FOMO. So knowing who you're targeting is such an important thing whenever you're coming to create whatever product it is. Or I'm obviously a writer, and I think of many different products that have come out recently. So the obvious one to go to is obviously Harry Potter, and already kind of touched on that earlier on. But having that demographic, then you'll be able to search. So, okay, so Harry Potter fans might also like this, or people who like Percy Jackson may also like this. But who is it for? Are we mainly targeting young boys? Or are we targeting girls? And what specifics? So, as detailed as you can get into drilling into who it is you really want to reach, who is going to be emotionally invested in this vehicle, and hopefully the success will come from that because these people are advocating for it so hard. Which brings us nicely onto knowing your message and meaning, which I think ties into all of this stuff as well. So what exactly is it that you're trying to say with your character's arc or the overall story of this? And that, you know, fans aren't stupid. You'll know when a story is kind of going off track from what it eventually started with. And I'll give an example of that. I'm a super fan, a lot of anime and manga, like since I was a kid, and I still am like a super fan today. So I was really into a show called Naruto when I was at school. And the reason that resonated so much with me when I was a kid, the first part of that story was that our hero was just, to all intents and purposes, a bit of a klutz. He wasn't skilled at anything in particular, but he had this one dream of just being the leader of essentially his village and being acknowledged. And because he was this underdog, because you didn't really see how he was going to become like this guy who's just messing around and like can't be taken seriously and has like no discernible skills or is not special. It's like, how is this guy going to become like the leader as respected of all these powerful ninjas, right? And that's the story that you're invested in. And when you're a young kid and you're not necessarily special at anything, it really resonates to have somebody represent you on screen, and you're going through all those trials and tribulations and you're rooting for him. And the message of that story, at least in that first part of it, was like, essentially anyone can amount to anything if you just work hard enough or believe enough in yourself to do it. And that meant a lot. So literally I was going in my GCSE, I was like, yeah, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to revise really hard because Naruto could do it, so can I. Honestly, but it does kind of matter just having that. So, but yeah, where it kind of, I guess, it's a series of highs and lows, so where it began to fall apart is in the second part of the series where he begins to get a bit more about respect, and he also becomes super OP, overpowered. So then it's like, well, the whole first act now doesn't really make much sense anymore because this guy is now coming into his own. So the message is completely changed. We obviously, as adults, know the reason for that. It's because, yeah, we need to keep the story going because it's really popular. Let's keep making money. But it just means that the core message changed. So you saw this massive peak of like the viewership, and then this kind of steady drop. Okay, now back up again. Oh, no, it's back down again. So, yeah, it matters a lot.
And did you feel personally attacked by that because it was impacting your identity as a Naruto fan?
Well, I mean, yeah. I'd moved on to another thing by that point, but I dipped into the manga just to see like how it was coming along and how it ended, but it kind of, as I say, it kind of lost me at a point. But there are various parts of the fandom. Again, like you don't own the fandom, so I could argue those are different people who liked part 2 more than they're wrong, but they're entitled to their opinion.
I feel the trauma. It feels personal.
Just a quick question about authenticity. You talked about Naruto kind of parallel with your GCSEs. Is authenticity kind of, does it change with age, or is authenticity a constant?
That's a good way of looking at it. I think like the best IPs will change but keep things the same. Like, look at any kind of franchise. Like, people really don't want too much different. They want it kind of the same but different, if that makes sense. So if I grew up watching Michael Keaton's Batman films, I can still go and watch a film with my nephew today, or go watch Marvel with my nephews today and stuff. And the core of the characters are kind of still the same, but they might add new elements to the story, for example. A great example, I feel like a lot of different companies are doing this now. So Stranger Things, let's say, it has a slightly older demographic. I know it's not especially kids' media, but let's not pretend kids don't watch it as well. But part of the reason that is like the most successful Netflix show, was on the old Metro, and I mean, it's now, I think it's Wednesday. But the reason why it's so popular is because it appeals to people who are parents now, who grew up with the Amblin stuff, the Spielberg shows back in the day, or grew up in the 80s and can refer back to that stuff. And it's like, I would say it's a homage, but it actually just knocks you on the head and says, hey, we're referencing this. Hey, Ghostbusters, yeah. But if you're a kid, you can also read certain universal things, right? So everyone kind of loves that gang and the Goonies and stuff, and the first couple of seasons definitely kind of had that feel to it. So I can watch that as an adult and still enjoy the references to things from my past, and I can watch it as a kid now and say, okay, I'm learning about this 80s and there's a cool aesthetic to it, but also there are certain universal things that still resonate now.
Great. And we've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask one question, then I'm going to, hopefully there'll be mics kicking around for you to all ask questions, because I know it's important. But while they're doing that, my question is something that you were talking about before, and it's how to balance creativity with safety in terms of user-generated content. So I'll start, Anna. We were talking about that.
Okay, so the conversation we were having earlier was around user-generated content, because we all do want to empower children to, express themselves, to get really into the story, to make things with their Lego bricks, to create fan fiction, to do all of that stuff. And the balance, of course, is doing so because they want to make it and then they want to share it. And then if they share it, where do they share it? How do they do that in a way that is appropriate and safe for them? And we were talking about how difficult that is, to be honest, because if you want to create environments in which children can share their own creations, you really have to moderate them yourself, and that is an investment of time and money. It's been going for years. I remember people sending in their paintings to Tony Hart on the BBC, or in magazines, with your pictures at the back, and there's an editorial curation that happens there, and that's great. But when you get to scale in digital, and people, kids, as much as anyone, just want that instant kind of satisfaction and gratification of pressing a button and seeing their thing, that's great. But I suppose my warning maybe to everybody in the room here was just be thoughtful about that, because what you're doing is inviting children to put themselves out there, and therefore you will be responsible both ethically and legally to ensure that what they do is then safe. And it's not easy, any of this. There's a tension between joy and safety and privacy and safety and all of those things. And this is our day job often at the Lego Group, thinking about how we do it. So it was just I completely love user-generated content, but be thoughtful about what you start, because you might end up with a big bill you didn't expect.
And Naomi, you mentioned a YouTube channel based around...
Yeah, we just have to be careful looking at when I guess UGC turns into almost a rights issue, because we might be looking at partners that we allow them to animate, for example. But if actually the UGC project, and there's one that's so professional, it became a studio with 100 fans who were all professionals in the industry, who were all doing it for free and for the love. And so we had to walk a really fine line between saying, actually, we'll let that go, but we probably can't allow you to do all the books so amazingly well as fan art, because actually then where does the official animation come from? So it's that fine line between allowing and encouraging fan art, but not sort of recreating a complete official brand experience as well.
Brilliant. Any questions from out there? Let's go to the back, because the microphone's there.
Hi there, I'm Maria. I'm a production and development coordinator at Carrot. I have a question. So with fandom, is that something you think that has to be considered during or before creating content, or something that's purely a reactive thing, that once the content is out there?
Let's go Ashley.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I got very reactive.
Sorry.
That's the first part of that, sorry.
Should fandom be considered before and while creating content, or do you think it's something that's purely reactive once it's out there?
Difficult one to navigate, because obviously without fandoms, what have you got? If I go back to the Stranger Things kind of conversation again, I remember in season 2 there was one episode which 11 went to a city. I think it was episode 8 or something of that season. It was one kind of outlier in that it took us out of that sleepy town environment and into a city where you learn more about the character. I actually really enjoyed it, but that was the lowest rated episode of that season, and they never went back to that again. And that was directly a response from the fact that on social media they were able to see that the fans did not like it and were able to change off the back of that. So I feel like there needs to be a level of flex to be able to be reactive like that. But at the same time, again, like keeping your core message and meaning is important to have that at the forefront of your mind and not just react, because essentially it is like the vehicle that you're creating as an author or auteur. But at the same time, yeah, as I say, you do need to be mindful of it, obviously, but I feel like there's a fine balance, really.
Dwayne.
Yeah, and I would love to add to that. From definitely a content creation perspective, I don't think fandom is something you can force. And this is something I've seen in every area of my career that I've worked in. I've worked in music, entertainment, the big shiny floor shows, and kids content. And the one sort of pitfall that I've seen creative teams fall down to is trying to create that next big thing. And it comes across your desk and this is going to be the next big thing. And it's just a carbon copy of something successful that's gone before. I think sometimes some content is just lovely content, and there's nothing wrong with creating a really, really gorgeous TV show. If you try and force fandom from that, you're really just mimicking, and it can get really grey. I think what's lovely about some of the shows and content we've talked about today is they've just been themselves. They've not tried to be anything else. And then it's our job as people in the industry to identify those fandoms, nurture them, and bring them to life as they exist today.
Yep. There, please.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. I'm a student. The question I wanted to ask was, fandoms can be used for like creativity and stuff. However, they can also be used for harassment, like shipping wars, fans arguing over different interpretations of the characters. What, if any, responsibility do creators have over their fans and how they treat one another?
I can answer this, everyone. This is a very important subject for our fan communities at Fandom. So the way a wiki works is that there's a hierarchy. There's the top admins that earn their rights to be there, and other people who edit and contribute, and all of that is moderated, and within them are a community. So there's a lot of safety measures within our platform to make sure that everyone's voices are heard, also respected, but also the information that ends up going out to the public as the truth is something that the whole fan community agrees on, and not just someone going rogue on Twitter, just saying whatever they want and criticizing a fandom, criticizing people who like part 2, right? There's a consensus in a community, so I think there are platforms that do that better than others. There's hate in the internet, obviously, but there's a way of moderating that when you need to ensure that multiple people need to agree to something to be right in order to be out there.
I would like to add to that if I could, actually, because I'm part of a lot of fandoms as a gamer, as a watcher, where there are definitely like levels of toxicity that I can be very specific about. So let's give Star Wars as an example, right? As we know, like there are a lot of advocates of people making their whole identity like Star Wars. I'm going to pass this on to my child, kind of level, and that kind of like level of ownership. Can lead to really toxic incidents, kind of which we've seen like during the latest kind of reboots from 2015 onwards, so Daisy Ridley's character and John Boyega. And John Boyega appearing in that trailer caused like a massive backlash because he's a black character, essentially. Oh, black guys in space. God for heaven forbid.
There's Ewoks, but no black people, please.
Yeah. Same with the second film as well. I can't remember the actor's name, I'm so sorry. But there's a massive pile-on, again, Asian character. And what the studios did and what the creators did was actually come out in support of these characters, which was really cool. Very similar thing happened with Lord of the Rings. I know this isn't the case.
Well, House of Dragon.
Right, yeah. Lord of the Rings, same thing kind of happened again there last year when they did the Rings of Power as well. And again, they just kind of showed that kind of level of solidarity. Do you kind of think that it is important to kind of just, put your mask down and say, like, we're not going to stand for this kind of level of bigotry? So, yeah, it is important.
Yeah, it shouldn't reward toxicity and...
We're coming to the last minute now, so I'm just going to go around in classic kind of qual focus group style and ask each of you for what your top tip would be for people wanting to. I know we've I know you can't just say, we're going to build a super fandom brand, but however, what would your top tip be for someone who was endeavouring to do so? And I'll start at the end and come this way. So Ashley, top tip.
Yeah, I think my point one really, like if you create something that you care passionately about and are emotionally invested in, then guarantee that somebody is going to be emotionally invested in that as well. And I think that's how you create the advocate who will hopefully follow you and hopefully make sure that your product, whatever it is, will reach a wider audience. But they're the people you want to keep with you, so having that authentic link is important.
Anna.
Yeah, remember that you're a visitor and you're not an owner. And so be thoughtful about what you do.
Naomi.
I think for me it's expect the unexpected. You never know what is actually going to suddenly catch on fire or really annoy your fans. So it's kind of expect the unexpected, monitor how they respond and adapt. Be flexible in your approach and be able to kind of move and change with what you see.
Dwayne.
From a brand and marketing perspective, embrace your creators, embrace those creative people, the producers, people that know how to create content, and then your job follows.
And finally, Sarah.
I would recommend everyone that wants to start a fandom to have a wiki and to have. It's true. You need somewhere where someone that wants to learn more can land and just consume and read or watch, but just have channels and have content out there for them beyond your book or your game or your film.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for taking part in this panel. I found it really entertaining and instructive, and I hope you have too. So if you could show your appreciation.